Well, thank you guys all for coming and weathering our awesome winter we're having. Hopefully you guys all got here safely in one piece so far. But again, my name is Malena Caruso, and I am a reporter and anchor for Channel 11. And I also opened a yoga studio right over on Washington and St. Clair, the Toledo Asana Room. So when Nate and I were talking about okay, why me? Why do you want me to come talk to you guys? He said, because you're doing some things and people may want to know how you're doing these things. So I tried to simplify it in my head before I came here to talk with you all. But before that, if you are sitting in a chair, can you come to the edge of your chair? If you're on a stool, can you make it so your feet are planted? Yeah, right? Like attention, right? In yoga we say samastitihi, standing at attention, right? Feet are flat, tall spine, close your eyes, and just notice your breath for maybe 5 inhales. And so this might be the first time that you acknowledged your breath all day. What I meditated on and prayed about before I did this was, what is the purpose? What is the why? What's the message? And I came to calm in the chaos. So stay with me, keep your eyes closed. Acknowledge all 5 senses, everything you're hearing, smelling, tasting, the light on the inside of your eyelids, what you're feeling, and just bring awareness to it, but not attachment. You might hear the cars outside, the coffee being brewed, but you're just becoming present. You're creating calm in the chaos. So take 3 more. Now gently blink your eyes open. So I think I needed that more than you guys did. So the reason why I wanted to start out with doing that was when I was thinking about calm in the chaos, what does that mean in our lives, right? How can we shift from being in a reactive state into a state where we respond with conscious thought rather than acting out of emotion? So when I was thinking about this with, how I kind of figured out where I am now, I've finally come to a space where I can try to go into that autopilot mode of sitting, pausing, and being present. And it took a really long time for me. My nickname my dad gave me was Spazolina, because I just had so much energy, I was all over the place, I wanted to do so many things. And my dad said to me, he said, you can't be good at everything. You can't do everything, you have to pick one thing. And I was like, no, I'm going to. And so that's kind of where I am now, with working full time at the station and teaching and practicing yoga. They're full days, but how I get through it is being present with each task, right, that I'm set to do in front of me for that day. And oftentimes that means slowing down time by being present. It might mean taking 5 breaths. It might be not worrying about what I have to do at 5 o'clock. What do I need to get done right now? And that's actually one of the biggest things in the yoga practice is being present. So Yogananda said that when we are present, the future will take care of itself, right? So when I was going through my transition, I had a rough couple of years. I moved to Toledo actually 5 years ago, January 19th. It was after the inauguration, or the last inauguration of President Obama. And I moved here, and I was like fish out of water. I didn't know anybody. And I kind of got burnt out a little bit in news. I took like a year and a half off, and my yoga practice started building, and I decided to kind of move in that direction and see where that took me. But what I found was I didn't have fulfillment. I wasn't feeling full of, like, in my heart, right? So when I sat down and looked at, you know, how can I do all of the things that my dad told me I couldn't do, right? My dad's like, you can't do everything at once. Well, I stayed calm, right? Calm in the chaos. I stayed calm, and I took a step back. And what I recognized was that I have 3 passions. And I realized once I figured out what those were, they were like the silos. And if one really wasn't full, or they weren't really even, then I knew something was missing. And mine are people, learning, and sharing information. And when I nailed down those 3 things, it made things easier. It made my decision making easier. So if I was asked to do something, I would kind of vet it with those 3 things. And that was really how I started stepping back from things that weren't serving me anymore. And that's a big thing to do, right? To step away after we've created attachment to something, whether it's a job or significant other or friend or like, it's hard because attachment is the root of all suffering. But when we let it go, we realize how much more we gain. So kind of fast forward to 2016, now I'm here, and I start at Channel 11, but there's still this like passion for yoga that I have to figure out what the heck I'm gonna do. And one of the things, so I had the tools in my toolbox. I had my 3 passions. I had how to stay calm in the chaos, how to step back and not react, but respond. But I was still trying to figure out the how of blending yoga with full-time job. And I recognized that I was making the decisions much harder than they needed to be. And it kind of leads me to my third thing, is that we often dramatize decision making. Like, has anybody ever like, all right, what do you want for dinner? Oh, I don't know. Do you want spaghetti? Do you want this? I don't know. I'm just not hungry. What do you want? Like, we make things so much harder from what we're gonna eat to like what we want to do with our lives, right? And it's the thinking that gets in the way of decision making. And when I made the decision, and in yoga there's root blocks, Mula Bandha, your pelvic floor, Uddiyana Bandha, right below your navel, Jalandhar Bandha, your throat. And they're meant to hold in the prana, or the energy, your life force, your breath. And we say in yoga, Mula Bandha, like sit up tall, like be confident, you got this. And it was very challenging for me to tell the news director when I had a contract sitting in front of me and saying, I can't sign this unless you make sure that I can still do yoga, that you guys aren't gonna like tell me at some point that I can't do yoga anymore. And I didn't say it exactly like that, but that was really difficult to say, like, firmly, like, no, this is something that's very much a part of my life. And, it's a package deal, right? Like, if I sign that, you're getting all this yoga business stuff too. And they were hesitant at first, but I realized once I said it out loud, once I made that declaration, it made all the other decision making so much easier. And it wasn't that big of a deal. Like, I had built it up to be this whole thing, and they were like, okay, make sure you get it, organized and whatever, doesn't interfere too much and whatever. And so far it's been easy. So when I was thinking about calm in the chaos, and I'm like, okay, what tools can we talk about that we can all do, right? So we have find your passions. We have our pause, become present, respond, don't react. And then we have our make your decisions easier, and it really is a choice. Like, we are blessed. God gave us the greatest gift, and it's to wake up every day and choose if you want to be happy or sad. We give everything that comes in front of us its definition, right? Like, we decide if this is a bad or a good thing. You know, it comes to us and we define it. So when we make choices, and difficult choices sometimes, we also, as a ripple effect, give other people permission to make those difficult choices too. You know, when people around you are really standing up and saying, no, this is what I want to do, and I'll make it happen. You know, have you ever been around somebody who's done that? Like, you said, wow, like, you're really doing that? Yeah, I am. And it's almost that feeling of bulabanda, like, I've got this. And that kind of leads me to my other segue, which was the decision making got easier for me when I stopped seeking affirmation and approval from others. That was a big one, right? Like, how many are like, I mean, wait, where'd he go? About getting as more likes and followers and retweets and, you know, all that stuff. Like, we're seeking affirmation all the time, right? In everything that we do, we want to know what people think, if they like it or not. But when you actually start doing things because it's part of your purpose and what you want to do, other people recognize that because it's genuine, right? Like, I always say, like, I could not sell like ice in the Nevada desert because I'm just not a salesperson at all. But if it's something I believe in, if it's something that's true to me, it's real to you when I share it with you. So then this led me to today being the celebration of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life, right? And I was at the Unity celebration at UT this morning, and like being there completely sidelined like what I wanted to talk about, because I had kind of planned all that out that I was going to share with you. But then I watched some of the video of, you know, Martin Luther King's, some of his speeches, and it was simple, right? Like, he didn't worry about what other people were going to say in what he did. He did what was on his heart. Like, he did what was true to him. And by 39, he was changing the world. And he found that early. I think he graduated college at like 18 or something like that. And he skipped 2 grades or something. But he found that early, and that's something we can all find. We have it. I wanted this also to be a conversation with you guys, with all of you, about, you know, what are your struggles? Where do you find yourself like stopping when you should be going, right? Like, where do we stop ourselves when we want to make that decision and do something we really want to do? What are we afraid of? And how can we use some of those tools of, you know, not reacting, responding, of finding your passions, of not making decisions harder than they need to be? Like, where in your life, like, it doesn't have to be an exact example, but I want this to be like a conversation with you guys. Does anybody want to to share something that's come up for you? You know, if this is like a yoga like workshop, we'd all be sitting in a circle and be sharing. Everybody would have to talk. Anybody have anything? Like, where do you feel stopped in your life? Like, where could you use those things, Richard?
I played soccer all through high school, but by my assessment, I was really bad at it the whole time. So I remember then, every time before I was going to step on the field, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to mess this up for all my teammates. They're going to hate me. Like, why am I playing defense? I'm going to let everyone score goals. Why am I playing striker up top? I am not going to score any goals. Everyone's going to be mad. I'm going to miss, these shots. And it wasn't until way after college, I didn't play college at all. It was after college, just playing like pickup, that I was like, oh, this game doesn't matter. And I would have like the best games of my life. And that was, I think, one of those, the thinking got in the way of doing.
Right, of being present. Like, worry about now, the future will take care of itself, right? Like, my mom would always say, I would get overwhelmed, and she would always say, do what you have to do today for tomorrow. You know, I'd get worried about school and class, or later in life, work, and da-da-da. And now, that's true to me too. Like worry about right now, like you're like, oh, this game is this game, right? Like it's just this goal, you know, it's one thing, and we tend to do a lot of forward thinking and create stories and create outcomes that haven't happened yet, right? Yeah. Anybody else? Like where is anything coming up like that you?
Yeah, like as I work on my business and all that, I started focusing more on like the process and like the self-improvement aspect to it, of like doing new things that I normally suck at or am uncomfortable doing. And as I tended to focus more on that, I just became more of a productive human being in general instead of focusing on the results. Because I was always worried about the results, and when I put more time on like the day and the process and the self-improvement aspect, it was more enjoyable for one, because I wasn't happy or sad about the outcome. I was just happy I did it, and then the results just followed.
Were choices easier to make?
Yeah, big time.
Why?
Because I knew that I should do it for like myself and not so much about getting the sale or getting the cheap apples and stuff like that.
Those apples, I remember that. Yeah.
And once you get into like that flow state, which is like, I don't know, scientifically they say like the happiest you can be is just like in your flow state instead of based on the results.
Did you notice that like things were deciding themselves, like decisions were happening? Like did you start to recognize that? Like almost like decisions were so easy that they just like happened?
Yeah, they did. I did, because I was really just focused on the process instead of the results. I mean, just shifting that focus has had like a tremendous impact.
Good. Yes, sir. Please, come on up. What's your name?
Ron.
Ron? Yeah, that was Richard and Ziad. I know that. What's
First,
up?
I want to thank you, Malena, for
Yeah, absolutely.
giving us the news, keeping us updated on news
Trying.
events. Thank you. Appreciate it. But you did mention Martin Luther King Day.
Absolutely.
I'd like to give a quote of his.
Please, here.
Here's a quote of his. What are you doing for others? You know, there's a high school here in Toledo. Their motto is men for others. And the first time I walked in there, I noticed that, and it kind of made an impression on my heart. Mm-hmm. But we started a nonprofit about a year and a half ago, ministering to veterans, getting homes for them and getting them in, you know, a place to live. So I just wanted to emphasize, you know, if you really want to feel fulfilled in life, think about others.
Absolutely. Thank you. You're right. I mean, why? It kind of goes back to like your purpose. Like, why are we doing what we're doing? Like, we get up every day, we brush our teeth, we put on our clothes, we go to work. But like, what is the why, right? We've talked about that before. What is the why? And that leads back to your purpose, like your passions. Like, what gets you going? Like, mine are people learning and sharing information. Okay, got it. I get to see people every day at work. I get to learn something new. I get to share information. Sometimes not the best information, but those are stories too. And with yoga, people, learning, sharing information, those are mine. That's what gets me going. So when you're thinking about doing things for others, you know, what's that why? Why would you want to? Well, because guess what? When we do things for others, when we do those selfless acts, it literally like builds more serotonin. Like it actually makes us happier. That's like the scientific side of things. Anybody else? I feel like you got wheels going. What's up? Yeah.
Me? Oh.
Yeah. I see them.
I definitely think like, especially like relationally, I've always focused on like, I don't know, I've always felt like I'm on the outside looking in of things, and like I'm the same way. I love people. I've always wanted to, I don't know, be around other people, like kind of be in the inside. And so the moment that I stopped really focusing on like, oh, what can I do to be cool, or what can I do to like fit in, I found like an awesome group of people who love me and who I think I was accepted before I even like showed up. I stopped like caring as much what other people thought.
Right. Absolutely. So that brings like an interesting thing about like caring, right? So we are not responsible for how someone else responds to our decisions, right? Like their emotional state isn't our responsibility. so long as I come from a place, I speak my truth from a place of love, right? Like even those difficult conversations, like I'm not responsible for you being mad at me because I had to change my plans. Like I'm going to do my best. I want to recommit. Let's put a different date on. But oftentimes we hold back, like we care when really we're probably making up a story. Like probably the outcome's not going to be as bad as what we think it's going to be. And we are seeking that affirmation and approval, right? So I started kind of changing my language around things. I started speaking more in I terms, which I catch myself now and I'll stop it, because speak from you, right? Speak we, like speak me, I. Like, and then you have to start owning what you're actually A, thinking and B, feeling when you speak in I terms. And second thing is I truly, and this sounds bad, and I remember I was talking to my dad and mom about it, and I was like, it's not that I don't care, it's just that I'm not attached to that outcome or to how this person will feel about it. Not in a bad way or a mean way, but just not attached. And it sounds really bad at first when you're thinking about it, but actually when you're not attached, you have less judgment about the situation, you have less emotion, you have less stories in your head when you can totally detach yourself from it. And it's very difficult and it takes a long, long time. And I, of course, am still attached to things. Of course, I want you all to like enjoy this conversation, but am I attached to the outcome? Well, no, I'm going to do the best I can and hopefully, get something out of it, but it is what it is. And when I feel that anxiety of, is this student in the yoga class gonna, enjoy this or get that next pose or do this or do that? Well, I'm not attached. I have to let people be. Does anybody else have anything with regards to like reacting versus responding? I know that's something that I've heard about for like years, but does anybody find themselves maybe getting really hot or sweaty palms, or if something happens and somebody's making you mad or somebody didn't do something or somebody forgot to send an email? Does that happen in your life at all, ever? Like the producer hasn't called me and I'm like, okay, sweet, like I'm standing out here in the freezing cold, like what are we doing? Like getting really anxious. I've learned that when I take emotion out of it, it makes it really easy. That way I don't react. But anybody else want to share anything about kind of these things? Yeah.
Well, it's hard to take emotion out of it if it's the people you love. So how do you do that?
Yeah, that one's tough, right? Because it goes back to attachment, and we're attached, obviously, because if it's a loved one. When I said that sometimes when we make decisions that can be harder, we're an example, we make it easier for other people to do the same thing. So when it's someone that I love or care about, the best thing that I've started to do recently or that I've done is really step back, like give space. Oftentimes when I've been in a yoga class, when I've been at work, when I've been with family, we try to fill space, right? Like we fill the page, there's no white space. We fill our planners, there's no space. We fill everything. We fill a room with people, that's a good thing. But if we're in a conversation, we have to fill the space, right? We feel awkward. Sometimes when it comes with family, actually allowing space isn't a bad thing. Like, we're always trying to fill the space. But if we actually allow space, the emotion comes down, right? Because you're not up here anymore. You're like down here. So when it comes to people I love, I know that I don't want to react, right? Because then I might say something that I don't truly mean. But if I allow space to digest the situation and to truly say, okay, why am I upset, right? Because oftentimes I might project on someone else really what's going on with me, right? So if I can look at why am I upset, or why am I nervous about telling my husband this, wife this, daughter this, whatever, come back to you, figure out the why, and give it a little space. I don't know, does anybody else feel that way? Like we cram space. Like we want to fill everything. That's why in the Ashtanga yoga practice, you know, you're not even really supposed to have a water bottle, right? Like you have a room and a yoga mat and your breath, and you just fill the space with breath. And it's like what we did in the very beginning, we created space. We sat down, we lifted up our shoulders, we closed our eyes, we created space to be present. We can do that all the time. And with family, I mean, like you live in the same house, you know, you're maybe share a car, you're on top of each other. So space is a really amazing tool for anything, whether it's any relationship. And you don't have to respond to every text message right away. I know, I'm guilty. I have a work phone and a personal phone, unless, you know, it's urgent. But someone's urgency isn't your emergency, right? How many times have you guys felt like that at work, right? Like someone's urgency isn't your emergency, right? Like you have to triage the situation. Give it some space. Like it's all good. So that's what I say a lot. It's all good, and it is. It really is, because we have a choice to make every day. Like whether a situation is good or bad, well, it's all good. It really is, you know. Anybody else?
Oh, no. I'm married with 2 kids under the age of 3. I get this all
Dude, you got this, yeah.
the time. So, you know, when one of us is flustered, either the opposite, you know, my wife or me, just what you said, I try to acknowledge the goal.
Yeah.
It's the bed.
Yeah.
That's all we're doing. And so I just want to find out what you wanted. I'm sorry I interrupted. And then I leave. You know, but it's
Right.
acknowledging, I know you have a goal. My goal is the same.
Same team. We're on the same team.
I know your goal. I acknowledge your goal. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. You know, but I acknowledge your goal. You know,
Yeah.
I got in the room where you were trying to put the kid to bed. My bad. You know.
And that comes to one thing that's interesting too. It's like if I have a significant other that I want him to take out the trash on Sunday nights, but I never ask him to, but I get mad because he never takes out the trash on Sunday night, like whose fault is that, right? Well, there really is no fault, but I never set that like ask, right? We should know, right? Like she should know, like but in reality, we create this story like, yeah, he just needs to, I'm doing the dishes, you know. I use that scenario because it's funny, like we forget to actually say what we want. Like I know that it was easier for me to say what I didn't want. I really knew what I didn't want, but did I actually know what I wanted? Like, I really knew I wanted to do something with yoga, but did I know what it was? Like I knew what I didn't want it to be, right? Because I'd experienced different yoga studios, different styles, but what did I really want? And that comes down to like knowing the other person's goal and asking questions, right? Yeah, totally. We set expectations are premeditated failures, right? Like it's so true. It's true for me. You know, if I have this expectation for, you know, John to if I have this expectation for him to do something, but I never ask him, you know, how am I supposed to be upset, right? Yeah, right? If I expect him to come to yoga, but I'm teasing him. Richard?
This is a healthcare thing.
Yeah.
Everyone has experienced it. I work in healthcare, so I've been a part of interactions within healthcare, so observed them, and I've been, a player in them. And when someone goes to a healthcare professional, there's an assumption that you're going to make it better. And then when the healthcare professional looks at the patient, there's often an assumption that, hey, I'm the doctor looking at you, the patient. I assume that you want to be as healthy as I think that is possible. And I assume that you think that what I think is right is what's best. And I've observed a lack of communication in healthcare environments that leads to people getting upset. And I'm always like, why are we upset? We're just still doing the best that we can. If people are like, no, you didn't do what I thought you were supposed to do. For both ends.
Expectations, right? Yeah.
We're just trying to help people not die.
Or live longer and happier.
And when you shed that by saying, hey, what do you want? And then
Right, the want.
and then the doctor says, well, that's not possible. Well, this is what we can do. And then the patient says, oh, well, let's try to do that.
Yeah, wants are a big deal. Like knowing what you, and I think we put a lot of emphasis on feeling like we need to know it all right now. You don't, right? As long as we're present right now, and the decision that we're making now, the future will take care of itself. You'll get into that process mode that Ziad was talking about, where you start making decisions because they're in line with you, right? I think, yeah.
I was just gonna say, one thing that came up when she was talking was, it's reasonable to have a reasonable amount of expectations. There's always expectations, right? But everything we engage with is a relationship. And there's always at least two parties in a relationship, right? So I think the big thing is when we think we know all of the variables and we have perfect expectations. But the reality is we always have at most half of the right amount of expectation, right? So I think when we know that going in, then knowing that I only have half at most is a great place to start. And then
Half at most, what do you mean?
Expectations, right? Because I think we all have a few expectations to start off with. But in the process, you focus on the process. You focus on the process. When you're focusing on the process, you're focusing on the process of seeing the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
It's I think that's one of the things the problem with the patient. I know everything, right? I just want to do that. But when we focus on I worked in healthcare too, but in the computer healthcare, I help people use their computer, right? So
Right.
So they think they know the
Tech
problem,
doctor.
but usually the problem is completely different, and their observation isn't wrong. It's just they didn't have that adequate information to interpret their problem. So once we both come to a proper ground, then you can come to the right solution based on sharing. But anyways,
I like it. Okay. Oh, we got things. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I have to remember something.
To go right along with what he said, we can have half the information, but we fill out the blanks then on the way we want it.
Right.
Instead of communicating with them to come to a agreement, how it should be.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, filling the space, right? We want to fill the space. Happens everywhere.
I think sometimes when we talk about letting go of attachment, people think that's just kind of floating through life and not having any goals or anything. Can you speak on that? Still letting go of attachment to specific outcomes, but still having a vision for what you want in life?
Yeah, absolutely. I let go of yoga completely in 2015. And I started realizing that where I was in that situation, I loved yoga too much. It was too much a part of my being to let it be the way it was. So I let it go. I stepped away from teaching. I stepped away from the studio I was affiliated with, because I knew what I wanted it to be deep down. And I knew that what I was in wasn't it. And that's what makes letting go easier. And it's hard to find. And it's not, it's a here, like it's a feeling. And we know it, like we know, like how many times have we sat there and like we know we wanted to say something in the moment, but we didn't say it. Like you knew a truth in the moment, but you didn't say it, right? So I knew that yoga would never leave me, right? Like I wasn't afraid of losing yoga. I just didn't want it that way. And when I really let go, I started receiving everything I wanted. So there's a book called Conversations with God. I don't know, Neil Donald Walsh. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of him. But he talks about attachment in this way. And it was, when I read it, I read it probably 6 times because I was like, oh my gosh. So we kind of self-sabotage. And in the example in the book, it's like this. He says, it is the action of man to love, destroy, then love again. So he gives different examples. One of the examples is relationships. So you meet someone, you kind of really like them, things are going well, you go out on a date, now it's like a couple months, then it's like 6 months, then it's like, okay, let's define the relationship, let's DTR, and then you're nervous, like, do I want to tell them how I really feel, because will I be rejected? Do they feel the same way? How will this change? Like, how will the relationship change now that if we define it? So what do? We break up with the person because we're afraid like they're gonna break up with us first because we didn't want to ask and tell them how we really felt. I wish Nick was here. And tell them how we really felt. So we break up with them, right? Then we're sitting there going, oh my gosh, but I really did like them and I really did love them and I want to be with this person. So then we try to go back and we say we love you, we want to come back and blah, blah, blah. Because we're so fearful of losing what we already have that we like get rid of it before it'll get rid of us. So another way to look at that is like, you can look at different figures regardless of, religion or anything like that. He gives an example of Jesus. Think of Jesus' story. He was born, Son of God, spent his whole life. He was loved by some, hated, died on the cross, now we all love him, right? So same thing, like think of people like Martin Luther King, even today. There were people who loved him, but they were so fearful of love, which is, we'll get to that, so fearful of that they destroyed it, right? And now we talk about these figures. You can think about it with Mother Teresa or Gandhi, all these people who we like pushed away, but we come back and love. So with attachment in that sense, it's that when you can really let go of something, that's when you really know you love it. But don't like step on your own foot, right? So in my situation, I loved it so much that I didn't want it to be in that way. So I let that situation go. I knew yoga was never going to leave me, but I let it go. Versus like in a relationship, deeming it not going to work, so I'm going to run, right? Because how often do we say like, oh, I don't deserve it, or I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve the raise, or I shouldn't get this job, or things like that. We do that to ourselves because like we're afraid of once we get it, we don't know what we're going to do with it, right? Like I think of my dog, not gonna lie, like he chases a rabbit. We're like, you get the rabbit, I don't think you're gonna know what to do with it. Like we chase things, but do we actually like know what we're gonna do with it when we get it? I really appreciate you guys letting me talk your ear off. Thank you for being a part of the conversation. And, I hope maybe just walk away and just pause a couple more times. I joked with some the other day, they were saying, oh my gosh, you're all over the place. And I said, well, I live my life in 5 breaths, 5Ks in commercial breaks, but all long enough to take a pause every now and then and be present in all of it. So So thank you. If you have any questions, I do have like cards if you want to ever reach out to me. Be happy to. If you want to let me know or email me stuff about what you're up to, be happy to pass stuff along. And I'd love to meet you guys more, and if you want to chat, you can do that too. So thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.